Hello and welcome. My name is Ricardo Gonzalez. I'm going to talk to you today about how you can migrate and upgrade your Oracle databases to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure using Oracle Zero Downtime Migration. I'll do a technical overview of the product, an introduction of how the product was created, the history about it, the different releases we've gone through, features and functionality, and the different workflows, and then cover and share with you some resources. Let's get started. So we're going to cover, what the product is, how it works, a bit of an overview, the evolution of it, features and functionality. Then I'm going to talk about the main methodologies, as I just mentioned, physical migration and logical migration. And then we're going to wrap up. So ZDM is a standalone product that you can download from our product website, which I'll be sharing at the end of the presentation. And the main idea of the product is to leverage existing Oracle technologies that fall under Oracle MAA, Maximum Availability Architecture, to help you do the best migration possible to the cloud with an automated and orchestrated way of migrating databases to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So how does ZDM work? So Oracle Zero Downtime Migration, ZDM, it's a downloadable binary that you download out of our product website. And it's light, it's a small file. This file, what it would do is once you install it, and the installation will happen in different places. You could, if you want to, install on a VM, virtual machine, in your premises, in your data center, in any server, or it could be running in the cloud, in a compute node if you wanted to. It's all fine. As long as there's connectivity to the source database and target database, we are fine with it. Now, once you have installed ZDM, the engine is up and running, you will have a response file, which is unique for each migration. And this file has information of the source database, target database, migration methodology, backup, etc., and different customizations that you want to do depending on what you're doing and how you're migrating your database. ZDM, as a main engine, works as an orchestrator. I will only send instructions to the source, target, and any other component that is required so that everything takes place. We pre-check, we validate, and then we execute the different steps, telling the different components what to do. So we automate and coordinate everything for you. And the idea behind this product was to simplify the migration process because we understand there's a lot of steps. So we wanted to automate them and provide an end-to-end automation function or, experience for you that will take the database migration from A to Z, from all the steps from the beginning to the end for you. As I mentioned, leveraging Oracle MAA, Maximum Availability Architecture best practices, and really important, making it free. There's no cost to ZDM. We're really proud about this and really happy of the fact that there's no cost to ZDM or the associated technologies that are used for that. And I'm more than happy to talk about this in some future slides, specifically what other products that we're using, how would that work, and how are we making them free for you? Now, the product itself, it's simple, and the idea is a single button approach. Now, this, of course, is an oversimplification. There's a lot of work that is required for you to do a migration. So you need to do a lot of work regarding the source database, target database, connectivity, etc. And we help you and we provide guidance in our documentation for everything that is needed. But we offer this, right, which is when everything is fulfilled, all the requirements are in place, and you're ready to do the migration, the product, if everything is in place and there's no issues, errors, etc., will take the migration from A to Z, from beginning to end, with one command. And that's why we call it a single button approach. Now, the product is fully comprehensive, again, being compliant with maximum availability best practices. We allow for pausing the migration at any given time, or you can actually tell the product, please stop when you reach this phase, and we will do so. Then you can resume as well. If there's any issues, the product will stop, and then you'll fix them, course correct, and then resume the migration and continue. We offer one feature that we call dry run option or evaluation mode. And basically what it does is it allows you to evaluate a migration, meaning you will do a migration without actually migrating data. Like ZDM will check source, target, backup location, connectivity, etc., and be sure that everything is in place so that when you actually migrate, you will not find any issues at that moment. Also, we have a feature called customizable user actions. Now, customizable user actions are great because there might be things that you want to do, scripts you want to execute, actions you want to take, that you want to take place, for them to take place in the migration, maybe at a source level, target level, at different phases. And this might be unique to your environment, right? So we understand, and of course, like the product cannot cover all the different corner cases and all the different singularities of each one of our customers. By introducing customizable user actions, what we do is we allow for you to register specific scripts in ZDM in the engine that you provide with the specific permissions that you provide. And then you can tell ZDM, please, I want you to run or execute this script at the source level when you reach this phase of the migration, or I want you to execute this script at the target level when you reach this other phase of the migration. So it's highly customizable and allows you to add an extra touch to the migration, your personal touch to the migration with whatever it is that you require and you have needs for. Also, really important, all databases in the cloud are encrypted by default. This means they have what we call TDE, or transparent data encryption. And some source databases, right, do not have this, and that's fine. For all databases that are 12.2 or higher, we require you to provide a wallet at the beginning of the migration, and we will take care of the encryption in an automated fashion at the target level upon restore. So you will end up with an encrypted database on the target. Also, we offer a centralized way of managing your migrations within this engine. You can schedule operations if you want for migrating later at some other time. We provide a really comprehensive set of logs so you can have a robust and rich audit trail. You can perform multiple migrations at the same time, so you do not have to wait. It's all in parallel, right? You can do 2, 3, 4 migrations if you want or more at the same time. You do not have to wait for one database to finish. ZDM can take care of that. Now, we offer different source databases, source platforms, and supported targets. So let me talk to you about them right now. We have standard edition databases and enterprise edition databases as a source for all. We support them. Databases can be running on-premises, or it could be running on other clouds as well. And we support databases starting in version 11.204 and then higher. For platforms, your database could be running on a Linux box in Solaris or AIX. We do not yet support any other operating systems, but we're targeting and we're working on this. One of the plans is to expand our capability to other operating systems as well. For targets, of course, we are meant for cloud migration. So most of our targets are cloud only, meaning the Oracle-based database service that used to be known as Database Cloud Service, the Oracle Autonomous Database in all its different flavors and options, like autonomous transaction processing, autonomous data warehousing, right? Dedicated and shared for both. Now we also have Exadata Database Service, which used to be called Exadata Cloud Service. Then, of course, the Exadata Database Service for Cloud at Customer. One important thing is that we also support Exadata on-premises as a target for your migrations, but it is not supported to migrate to targets that are not here. So non-Oracle Cloud, non-Exadata. Now, you might have heard about the product before, or you might not, and that's fine. The product actually, it's kind of new. We've been out for 3 years, and we started in November 2019, right? With a really, I'm really, really happy to introduce that release back then that allowed us to have physical migration, limited targets, and just Linux sources. And ever since, we've been growing and presenting more and more features and functionality to you, and making the product more robust, stronger, with different things. So, for instance, in March last year, we released 21C with logical migration, autonomous database target, conversion for multi-tenant databases, etc. Then late last year, we presented, the capability of cross-platform migration, better enhancements for physical migration, and also having databases coming out of AWS RDS. And then this year, we introduced 21.3, that has a really good set of features regarding physical migration, like data guard broker integration. So now that's part of our physical workflow. Standby databases as a source for support. At least the initial data transfer comes out of the standby database if you wanted that. Also new targets from databases coming out of AWS RDS, and full support for logical only migration coming out of big endian such as AIX or Solaris, so full cross-platform support. So as you can see, we keep growing, and I really like the fact that over 3 years, we've had these 5 releases. I like to think that ZDM is like a startup within Oracle, and we do a really good job at turnover and delivering new features and functionality and helping our customers being up to speed and providing the best product, the best engine for database migration related to Oracle databases and Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Having covered this, I'm going to talk about the different migration methodologies. As I mentioned, we have physical migration and logical migration. So I'm gonna start with physical, but I'm still gonna mention briefly logical right now, and then later in the presentation, I'll be talking about proper logical migration once we've covered physical in depth. So we have physical migration, which has 2 ways of working. First, we have the offline methodology, in which ZDM leverages Arman or the recovery manager to create a backup and restore, right? So basically we create backups, we transfer them to the cloud, use them for instantiation of the database, restore the database, and then once we have a target in place, we do the switch over and we automate the whole process for you. This is great for standard edition databases or databases that do not have any high availability and online requirements. But we understand that, of course, you want, online and high availability. So this is where we use our physical online migration workflow. And of course, we still use Arman for this, and we use Arman for the initial data transfer, the database instantiation in the target, but we leverage DataGuard for our synchronization between the primary and the standby in the cloud, and then of course for the switchover, etc. And there's these different ways of working here. We can use a backup location in the cloud, like the object storage. We can do a direct data transfer between the source database on premises and the target database in the cloud. And again, we can use also a standby database at the source level as a initial source for the data transfer. I'll be covering the different use cases in a bit. Now, of course, we also have logical migration. What about logical migration, right? So logical migration also has both 2 flavors, the same as physical, offline and online. In this case, for offline database, offline database migration, what we do is we do data pump export import, and we leverage data pump in order to do the initial data transfer. And of course, once the database was imported and in place at the target in the cloud, we do the switch over and completely clean up and set up for you. This is good if you don't have any high availability requirements. You could use a backup location or that export import, or we can also use database links, which is not really recommended for big databases, but we have that in place. And then we have logical only migration, which leverages, again, data pump for the data transfer. But in order to provide synchronization between the source and the target, we offer Golden Gate. And Golden Gate is a great tool. You all know it. It's amazing. But there's a price to it, right? So we're happy to announce that for the usage of Golden Gate with ZDM is free. There is actually a specific license for this with specific timing, etc. And I'll be talking more about that when I cover the logical migration section. But you have to, this is a good news, right? Like as I mentioned, ZDM is free, and also the technology that we use will be free if you're using it alongside ZDM. So I'll cover this in a bit. Now I'm going to go back to physical migration and talk to you more about it, and also cover like a step-by-step of how the migration would work. So physical migration was our first workflow for our first release, and we've only grown stronger with new features, new functionality. It's really well used. If you do not need to do an upgrade, if you do not need to go to autonomous, or if you're not coming from a non-Linux sources, this is the way to go. It really just works out of the box. How and what does physical migration do? Well, first of all, it has to be from the same version to the same version. So if you are an 11G, you have to go to 11G. 12C to 12, 18 to 18, etc. It does allow for non-CDB to PDB conversion. We do a trick underneath the covers to do a conversion when we're doing a migration. And if you're interested, my contact information is here at the beginning and also at the end of the presentation. I'll be more than happy to set up a session or talk to you offline to tell you more about how this non-CDB to PDB conversion works. Now, targets, we support Oracle-based database service, formerly known as Database Cloud Service, and Exadatabase service at Cloud Customer, Exadatabase at Cloud, so Cloud Service, XACS, and then, of course, Exadata on-premises. One important thing is that even though we have to go from the same version to the same version, we do support for differences in patch level. So the patch of the target could be higher. That's fine. ZDM will then run data patch at the end of the migration to ensure that everything is consistent. Now, as I mentioned, we have two ways of working. One is the offline migration. You can see here an example of how this could work. You have ZDM on a separate VM running at your data center, the application connected to your database, right? And then you have the cloud. You have Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and well, this is how it would look with the object storage, your tenancy, service gateway, dynamic routing gateway, etc., your virtual cloud network, and then of course the target Oracle Database Cloud Service. For physical online migration, the architecture looks pretty much the same, with the difference that we have an extra connectivity for data card, right? So it's a SQL connectivity between the source and the target, where we will have data card in place. Now, you do not have to do any of this for data card, etc., right? You just need to provision your target database cloud service, have connectivity, accessibility to the source and the target via ZDM, and then ZDM takes care of the rest. Now, the question would be, how does this happen, right? How does ZDM takes care of this migration, right? So let me cover an step-by-step migration for you on an online fashion. So how ZDM will do database migration with physical online migration, right? So the first step, of course, would be for you to download and configure ZDM, right? And there are many things you have to do. You need to provision a virtual machine or somewhere where ZDM can be in your data center, then install ZDM there, and then have it up and running. And then fill the response file that I mentioned before, this file that has information on the source database, target database, migration methodology, backup, RMAN parameters, etc. Everything that is needed to fine-tune the migration. Then you need to ensure that there's connectivity between ZDM and all the different moving parts of the migration, and then all the prerequisites that we list in the documentation are fulfilled. And then finally, really important, you need to provision a target database, just a placeholder database that we have there, because ZDM will need it in order to do the actual migration for you, right? So once that's in place, this is where it gets interesting, right? You issue a migration command in ZDM, and ZDM is a command line based product, right? So you issue the command for it to do the migration, which is actually ZDM CLI, as in ZDM command line interface. So ZDM CLI migrate database with a lot of information, source, target, responsible information, and then we ask for authentication and different passwords that you will provide when you're asked. And once everything is in place, what ZDM does is it starts the migration. So everything that I'm going to talk about right now, it's automated. You don't have to do anything. Once you issue the command, ZDM takes care of it, right? So ZDM will connect to the source with the target and the backup location, in this case being a bucket of the object storage in the customer tenancy, and perform all the required validations, source, etc. Just be sure that the migration can take place. So it goes and checks everything, right? Versions and whatnot. Then what ZDM does, it orchestrates the transfer of backup files between the source database and the object storage, right? We'll first have to create them, although we can use existing one if you point to them. But we create L0 and L1 RMAN backup files, and then we transfer them, or ZDM transfer them to the selected backup location, in this case, of course, the object storage in the Oracle Cloud, right? Once that transfer has happened, what ZDM does is that it'll instantiate a target database in the cloud, right? This database is, of course, TD enabled, it's not encrypted, and now you have two databases. A primary database where the application kept working, and a target database in the cloud, that is a standby, but there's no connectivity between them. And of course, this new target database is completely out of sync because it was created out of backups, while of course the application kept working. So what we need to do now is synchronize them, right? So ZDM will then establish a data card relationship, and if you enable it with the broker, because we have that as a new feature, between the primary database and the standby, right, in the cloud. This is great because it starts synchronize them, and then you could either pause here if you want. You pause, complete the migration, do any test you want. The synchronization keeps on going, and then when you're ready, you resume. And what ZDM does, ZDM performs a switchover. So now the application is pointing to the database in the cloud, but it also performed a role swap. So this database in the cloud is now the primary database. On the database on-prem or on your premises or data center is a standby database, right? So now the data card relationship stays. You actually could configure ZDM so that this stays even after the migration. But right now, just for the purposes of keeping this, ZDM is what it did, right? Switch over the application and role swap so that the database in the cloud is the primary that is now shipping logs, etc., to the database on premises in the standby. Now, after this, of course, ZDM, what it would do is it finishes the data card configuration, cleans everything and performs validation at the target level, and then executes a data patch, right? So basically, it checks that everything is at the right patch level at the target level. And once everything is, verified as successful in the migration, what ZDM does is it cleans up the environment and exits gracefully, meaning finishes the migration with a success, right? So it takes care of all of these steps, cloud registration, all the tooling with the cloud, etc., for you. So yes, of course, there's a lot of these things that you could be doing manually, and sometimes you have in the past. Now you don't have to anymore because we offer all the automation for you. Now, this, of course, is valid when you're doing migrations between sources that are on Linux and when you don't have to upgrade. What happens, though, if you actually come from Solaris or AIX, or if you want to do an upgrade at the same time, or if you're going to autonomous database? Well, in that case, you need logical migration. And ZDM has that for you. We have the logical migration. If you remember, I actually presented this slide just some time ago with logical offline using only data pump and logical online using data pump and Golden Gate. ZDM logical migration allows for many other things, right? So now you can do in-flight upgrade, right? Which means you can actually migrate your database and upgrade at the same time. So you could do a migration from 11.204 to 12.2 or 19, or from 12.2 to 19 if you wanted to. This is valid for any version that is lower to a higher version, of course. And yes, you can do a migration from a non-container database to a pluggable database, or non-multi-tenant to multi-tenant, or non-CDB to PDB, right? We allow for that as well. And then the targets are the same as physical migration, with the addition that now we also support autonomous databases. Now for the architecture, we have, of course, the logical offline, which is quite simple, as you can see here, because there's just the usage of data pump for an export input. But if we are to add online migration, that changes because, as I mentioned before, we use Golden Gate. So what we have now, of course, is extra connectivity between the different components. And we have compute node that works as a Golden Gate hub that has 2 microservices for Golden Gate. It has a one Golden Gate deployment that ZDM will configure then with 2 microservices, an extract that connects to the source, and a replicate that connects to the target. And I'll be explaining how this works in detail in a bit. But before I go into that, I actually promised you something at the beginning, right? Which was, I said that the product was free, and then I'm talking about Golden Gate here, right? And I told you I was going to explain how that works. So let's do that, right? So when you use Oracle Zero Downtime Migration, there is, it's free. There's no cost to it. Even if there's encryption or other, advanced security options that are part of the migration, we have a specific license. If you go to our licensing guide and the restricted use licenses, we talk about this as well. But what about Golden Gate, right? So if you go today to your cloud account at cloud.oracle.com, and after login, you go to the marketplace, you can look for a specific image called Golden Gate for database migration. This image is great because it actually offers the possibility for you to have a Golden Gate deployment free of charge. And the license, of course, is there, and it can change. It's important for you to review it. But right now, the license is for 183 days. So basically, if you open it, you can use it for 6 months at no cost. And this is really important because then you can do your migration, testing, etc. And you have free Golden Gate. But it has to be in conjunction with Zero Downtime Migration. You cannot use it by itself. Now, there's many ways for this to work, right? The first one is if you're migrating to any database that is in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, so Database Cloud Service or Exadata Cloud Service or Autonomous Database, then great, you deploy this image for the marketplace that creates a compute node and has a Golden Gate deployment that ZDM will leverage to create two microservices, an extract and a replicate. That's all good. But what happens if you're migrating to Cloud Customer, right? You do not want to have this Golden Gate deployment or GG Hub in the cloud. What would make sense is for you to actually have it on your premises in your data center, right? So what we offered was, and this is actually really good as well, you go to the cloud marketplace, same image, you accept it, you deploy it, you have it there. But if you go to the file system of that compute node, you will find a Docker container. And that Docker container you can download into your premises and then set it up, and you'll have that same deployment for Golden Gate on-prem. So basically, it's the same thing, but it will be contained within your data center for you to use ZDM. Now, if you're using ZDM for Exadata on-premises migration, which as I told you, it's also an option, you need to bring your own license. That's the only use case where this is not, covered. But for all cloud migrations, cloud customer migrations, here you go. So you go. I remember cloud marketplace. The image is Golden Gate for database migration. Now, I would like to talk to you, of course, on how this works on a step-by-step basis for logical migration and in an online fashion with Golden Gate. So why don't we do that, right? We have logical migration. Let's talk about the workflow on a step-by-step fashion. So at the beginning, this will be exactly like the same as with physical migration, right? That you need to download and configure ZDM on a box and provision it and be sure that everything is in place and ensure that there's connectivity and everything is fulfilled as prerequisites, right? But then you have to fill the ZDM response file, right? And then important thing here is that the response file changes because the parameters are different. You're not doing a physical migration, you're doing a logical online migration. So it would have data pump parameters, Golden Gate parameters, etc. Right? Now, you of course have to provision the Golden Gate hub as I mentioned, because you will need some parameters regarding this hub for the response file, right? But when you've done all of this and then you have it in place, what you do, of course, is you now issue the migration command. And as I mentioned, now everything that happens from now until the end, it's done automatically by ZDM. So ZDM will now connect to the source, to the target, to the backup location, and to the Golden Gate hub and perform all the different validations to be sure that everything is in place. And once all the validations are there, what ZDM does is that it actually connects to the Golden Gate hub and creates one microservice that is actually an extract. This microservice will connect to the source database and start capturing transactions and then storing and creating trail files at the Golden Gate hub that will be then used later, right? Then the next step is for ZDM to actually go to the source database and tell, okay, we need to create a data pump export and transfer them to the object storage, right? So that's the next task, and ZDM gets on it, and the source database starts doing the export, right? Then the DOM files, right, of course, are imported from the backup location to the target database, right? And are used for instantiating a target database. So now you have a source database and a target database in the cloud. Now, of course, the database in the cloud, it's out of sync because it's out of an export, and the application kept working. So we need to sync it up. So what ZDM does is that it goes to the Golden Gate hub and configures a second Golden Gate microservice. In this case, a replicate. And this replicate is what it does is it'll feed out of the trail files and all that the extract is generating, right? And start applying them on the target database in the cloud, right? So now we have, of course, two microservices, one capturing transactions from the source and one applying transactions in the target, right? So what ZDM does now, of course, is to monitor the Golden Gate replication and wait for no lag to be present. You could, of course, pause here if you wanted to, or you could just, let it continue, and ZDM will, when it's ready, take care of the rest. But if you pause here, you could do your own testing, etc., and then, of course, resume the migration when you're ready. Now, ZDM, when it doesn't see any more lag present, it switches over, right? So now you have, the database in the target being now the main database, because the application is pointing at it, right? This is all, of course, done by ZDM. And at that moment, what ZDM needs to do, of course, is then clean everything up, right? So you have the application connected to the target database, all validation of the migration was done, pause checks to be sure that there was nothing wrong, and then, of course, cleanup of connectivity, setup, etc., and then finalizing gracefully the migration process for you. So that's pretty much how it would work. There might be some differences. For instance, I've been talking about migration to the cloud, right? But what happened about cloud customer, right? Or Exadata on premises? For both physical and logical, you could do this, but you will not use the object storage, right? You would be using, for instance, external NFS, etc. Now, this product automates everything for you, as I mentioned, right? It's does all the pre-checks, validations, etc., and automates the migration from A to Z, from beginning to end for you, both for physical and logical migration, right? So, in summary, ZDM allows for many sources: Linux, AIX, Solaris, third-party clouds, different targets in the cloud, database cloud service, Exadata cloud service, autonomous database, cloud customer, Exadata on premises, different workflows like physical and logical, as I just showed to you, using the recovery manager, using data guard, using data pump, using Golden Gate, and Golden Gate for free, right? With different features and functionality, non-CDV to CDV conversion, upgrade in flight, and a full automation for you, and no cost, right? Free for you, which is great. Now, of course, you want to learn more about this, and you want to see, well, where can I get resources to train myself in ZDM and the different products, right? So you can go to our website, www.oracle.com/go-to/ZDM. And then, of course, you can download product. You can check our documentation. You can see the different guides that we have to offer. Like we have step-by-step guides for most of the main use cases. And of course, we have the Oracle Live Labs. And I really recommend for you to go there, because then it'll take you on a step-by-step basis on how to set up everything in the cloud. We even offer an image with a source database and a compute node for ZDM. And then we explain to you how to even deploy the Golden Gate Hub and how to do a live migration, so you can actually, play and get yourself acquainted with the product. So please remember, visit www.oracle.com/go-to/ZDM. For me, it's been a pleasure to be with you today. Please feel free to email me or contact me with any ZDM questions or Oracle or other migration questions that you have. Thank you so much.